Welcome to Fresh Off the Set. I'm Carrie Hawker-Diaz.
And I'm Brooke Mangum. Thanks so much for joining us today. Today's a good day. You're going to get some free advice today. And the even better news is that we're not the ones giving advice. It's an actual professional who knows what they're talking about.
You don't want to trust us with certain things.
No. I'm somebody like maybe you'd trust with like your second favorite pet, not your first.
We may be able to entertain you, but we're not going to teach you much.
No.
I talked with TJ Woodward on this one, and it's great because he talks about like how to build bridges in a divided world by living in the question. So like how to better ask open-ended questions.
Okay, so like instead of, I can understand this, you can get to the deeper thing with somebody. Because a lot of times, like I know when I talk to my daughter, I say, how's your day? Good, right?
Yeah,
and then
right.
You just stop and there's nothing else that evolves from just asking somebody something so open-ended like that.
Yeah, and they just kind of forget. They're like, I don't know. I feel like I get that answer a lot,
Yes.
right? I don't know. I forgot. And so open-ended questions are so important, not only with your kids, with your partners, with people you work with. I mean, it can just make your relationships and even with yourself a lot better, which like we're constantly trying to work on all the relationships in our lives.
Well, if you think about life in general, like think about the number one theme is relationships. Everything that you do has a relationship, whether, like you said, whether you're at work, whether you're at home. And if we can find a way to better navigate those relationships, life is going to be better.
I mean, that's gold. Another thing that I love we talked about is the mindset of I am right, you are wrong. So it generates external conflict.
Thank
right?
you, Carrie. I am right, you are wrong. Correct. Check box.
And do we see the conflict here now that it's arising? But he talks about answer-focused mindsets and how that can impact our personal relationships and even like our internal well-being. So yes, Brooke, you were absolutely right in the beginning when you said we're getting therapy and you're getting it free.
Yes, there you go. So without further ado, here you go. Here's your free advice.
You're welcome. Okay, TJ, can you explain the concept of living in the question? How does it encourage authenticity and greater connection in relationships?
Well, really, it's pretty simple. Questions open up connection, and answers can sometimes cause separation. And most of us get taught from a very early age that finding answers is important. And even though in many cases it is, when it comes to personal relationships and other issues in the world, which I'm sure we'll talk about, when I'm only looking for answers, sometimes that can create more division or separation. And if I'm genuinely interested in asking questions, it does create more connection.
Gosh, that's a good point. Absolutely creates that connection between people. Okay, what inspired you? I'm interested to explore the practice of embracing uncertainty rather than like seeking immediate answers.
Well, I think that's at the root of it, right? I think a lot of us seek answers because we think we find comfort in that. If I can just figure out the answer. And again, as I mentioned, we get programmed from a pretty early age to seek answers. And so the discomfort of not knowing is something that's for many people, it's a practice. And I have found so much freedom in leaning into the not knowing.
Okay, I love that, leaning into the not knowing. All right, what are some of the challenges, would you say, or conflicts that arise when we focus solely on finding answers rather than like staying open to possibilities?
Well, if you look at the current political climate, it answers itself, right? Mm-hmm. We find ourselves in camps, and we find ourselves often in camps based on common belief. And if you look back throughout, the history of humanity, of course, we needed to find a tribe or find a group of like-minded people in order to survive. The question I have for people is that now antiquated, or is there a different possibility? So rather than looking to create a group of people who all agree with us, what would it be like to actually genuinely ask people questions and listen to their answer? Then I can find compassion and connection, even if I don't have a total agreement with someone's point of view.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just staying open to possibilities, because really anything can happen, right?
Absolutely.
Okay,
that's the goal anyway.
Yes, it's true. Okay, how does this answer-focused mindset impact our personal relationships and even like our internal well-being?
Well, I think when it comes to internal well-being, as I said, I think there's a sense of if I can figure out the answer, then I can be at peace, I can be comfortable. But the truth is, when we ask questions, we actually, as we learn to be in the unknown, which is another way of saying it, is just to stay curious. In personal relationships, many of us have the experience when we have an opinion that is different And if I'm really deeply rooted in, I have the right point of view here, that automatically causes separation. And then we have to work really hard. And we end up saying things like, well, let's just agree to disagree. But that really is still not a deep connection.
That's so true. Okay. And you think about a lot in relationships. You think of like the I'm right, you're wrong, I'm right. You mentioned that mindset of the I am right and you are wrong generates external conflict. How can people avoid like falling into this trap? Because it's so easy to do, especially in divisive situations.
Well, I think it's kind of a big answer, really. It is, if I am my opinions, or I believe I am my opinions, then I'm naturally going to be deeply rooted in being right about something. When I start to understand there's a part of me that is beyond my opinions, in other words, I have thoughts, but I'm not my thoughts. And then we start to end up in a new arena where we're like, oh my gosh, this whole time I thought I was my opinions. And if I believe I am my opinions, that's where we start having the conflict of right and wrong.
Oh, that's so good. Why do you think this type of thinking is so like persuasive in our culture today?
Well, I mean, again, we've been trained. And if you look at a lot of the media, a lot of the news channels, right? I mean, the divisiveness for some reason can be really seductive. And I actually think there's a level of this that's unresolved trauma. Like if I have trauma in my past that I haven't resolved, it's easier to point fingers and blame someone or look at how someone's different than I am. And if we look at the root of all conflict throughout human history, it's always rooted in I'm right and you are wrong.
It's so true. That's so absolutely. Yeah. How do you think the belief in a singular unreachable answer can create internal conflict and feelings of inadequacy? Then we can feel like, feeling less.
Yeah. I mean, again, if I believe I am my opinions and then I don't have an answer for something, then I start to feel like dysregulated and uncomfortable. And the interesting part is it's really paradoxical because, as I said before, when I'm willing to lean into the discomfort, there's actually more freedom in that. And then I become curious not only about other people's opinions, but my own. The cliche, don't believe everything you think, is really valid here.
It's so true. Okay, what steps can someone take, would you say, to like embrace uncertainty and find peace and not having like all the answers, and that's okay?
Well, I like to actually use open-ended questions on myself. So I would invite someone to say, if I am not my opinions, who or what am I? We could sit with that for at least 24 hours and explore what might come up. And then we might start to realize, oh, I don't have to agree with everyone in my life. And as I said, I don't even have to agree with myself. It's interesting sometimes in politics, politicians get in trouble for changing their opinion. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what human doesn't want to evolve and have a different point of view? I don't want to believe what I did when I was 18. That is for sure.
Yep, same. Why are open-ended questions, in your opinion, such a valuable tool for fostering connection and understanding in relationships?
Well, I think when we use open-ended questions like, who am I really? What's the highest possibility here? How can I create a deeper connection with my partner, my boss, my friend? When we're in those questions, we start to explore possibilities rather than just having finite answers. So if we live in a question, for example, if we just ask ourselves the question and we live in it for the day, what else is possible in my life today? If we just live in that question for a 24-hour period, the things that show up are really remarkable, because when we believe we have an answer, it's literally all we can see. But when we start opening up with these open-ended questions, we start to see that there are lots of different possibilities than we might perceive.
So true. Okay, if someone's listening right now thinking, okay, I'm not quite sure if I understand, can you maybe share examples of powerful open-ended questions that can lead to greater intimacy or growth, like within our relationships?
Yeah. I mean, let's imagine a partnership. Let's say your spouse, your partner. You might ask a question like, legitimately, a question as simple as, how are you today? How are you really today? What are you experiencing right now? What are you noticing? How can I create greater connection with you? I mean, imagine asking that to someone and then really listening to the answer. I have a few favorites. If I can't think of any, I just say, what else is possible, or how does it get even better than this? Those are my two favorites.
Ooh, that's good. Okay, and you suggest avoiding quote unquote why questions in favor of more open-ended ones. Can you explain why the why questions might limit conversations and how reframing them can lead to those deeper discussions that we like and that we need and probably want?
Yeah, even though a why question can technically be an open-ended question, I find personally that when I'm asking why, I in some way think there's something wrong here. Like, why do I keep experiencing this? Why does this keep happening? Why do I keep choosing these relationships? And I think that why can somehow keep us stuck. If I change from why to who, where, what, or how else might I see this? What might need to change within me so I can have a different experience in this relationship? You can even feel the energy of how it's different when we ask the how, who, where, and when. We start to open up, and the why sometimes gets us feeling stuck.
What would a question be like? Maybe an example of a why question.
Well, like, why does this keep happening? Why do I keep doing this? Why is this person the same as my last partner? Why do I keep choosing these unavailable people? These are questions I hear a lot. And in some way, I think it can keep us stuck kind of in the victim mindset. And I don't mean that to be in any derogatory way, but I'm basically giving the power away.
Sure. That makes sense. Okay. Let's talk about maybe open-ended questions and allowing us to move past judgments and preconceived notions and open up new possibilities in our daily interactions.
Well, I'm going to actually give you an example. So my dad and his wife I live in LA, Los Angeles, and they live in LA, Lower Alabama. And they made that joke. Well, we live in LA too. And when they came to visit me in LA, they said, everyone's so friendly. That's not what I expected. So I asked some opening questions. Why didn't you expect that? Or where did you learn that might not be true? Well, people in Alabama said that people in LA were going to be conceited, not kind, arrogant. And I said, don't worry, if we walked around LA right now with a microphone and asked people their opinions of Alabama, they'd probably have judgment too. So in some ways, it's really clear what judgment creates. And it was great to watch my stepmother because she's like, oh, I have a new point of view now simply by being open.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Okay, can you provide an example of how maybe this approach has positively impacted a relationship you've encountered in your work?
Oh, absolutely. I would say every relationship that I've been in has had benefit from moving into questions, because to me, there are 3 steps: awareness, awareness, and awareness.
Okay.
So if I'm aware that I have an opinion, if I'm aware that I have a judgment of myself or another, I just shift into asking an open-ended question. So I can think of so many work situations, so many business situations, my personal relationships. When I notice that I'm experiencing a judgment, instead I pause and just ask a question. And if I can ask 3 questions, I will feel more connected at the end of those 3 questions.
That's so good. Staying open to possibilities. That's really good. Okay. You've mentioned questions like, what's the highest possibility here now? And how can I remain curious about the relationship? How do questions like these change the dynamic between 2 people?
Well, I mean, most of us give our opinions and try to have the other person understand us.
Yeah, we want to be understood, right?
We want to be understood. And, this is certainly not news here. I'm not the first person to say this, but when I shift to understanding rather than trying to be understood, it automatically creates connection.
It's so true. I think about that with my husband and I when we're, and getting in arguments, and we have changed the way we communicate. And it's more of we both try to understand where the other person is coming from. And that's a game changer.
Yes, because then we can say, oh, you see it differently than I do, but that doesn't make me right and you wrong, or you right and me wrong. It's just we have a different way of seeing it.
Right, exactly. A different way. Okay, are there other questions that have stood out to you as particularly effective in creating meaningful connections?
I think we've named so many of the questions. I would invite anyone who's listening right now just to ask themselves what question, and this is actually an open-ended question, but what question can I ask of myself or someone I'm close with right now that would foster greater connection? Just notice what comes up. Sometimes, we're all so busy. We all have social media. We have our phones in our hands now. Sometimes it's just taking 3 minutes of silence and asking the question and listening for what question will actually help me create more connection in my life now.
Oh, just talking about that, TJ brings calmness to me. just,
right?
You know, that's so true. So true. Okay. For our listeners, what advice would you give to start practicing the art of living in the question in their like day-to-day lives? Would you say thinking about this every day, like in the morning?
Yeah, there's different ways to practice it. One is if I notice myself, we use the word triggered, but I like to say activated. If I notice I'm having a response, whether that's to a social media post, a news story, the way my partner looks at me, if I feel that surge, I can pause and ask a question. But there's a more formal way too. You can choose a question every morning. That's a great, like a 30-day practice, and just ask yourself that question throughout the day. The third way is if someone who's listening right now practices meditation, you can just set the timer for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Ask yourself an open-ended question kind of internally over and over during that time and just notice what emerges.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah, during meditation. That's awesome. I want to point out, I like how you said activated instead of using the word triggered. That's really good.
Yeah, because when we say trigger, we often give the power to the other person. My mom triggered me, my boss triggered me, my spouse triggered me. But when we say activation, we say, oh, they said something and something got touched. When we're curious about what got touched, that we can actually heal or work on rather than trying to control the other person, which is what a lot of us have been trying to do. And nothing inherently wrong with that. But the question is, how is that working? Which is definitely an open-ended question.
That's good. Oh, I just had to point that out. That was really good. Okay. Last question. If someone is struggling, TJ, with internal conflict or divisiveness in their relationships, where would you suggest they begin with this practice?
I would say begin by noticing what you're feeling as the person is talking or as you're responding. Because when I was, quote unquote, learning to practice conscious listening, I knew I was supposed to look at the person and nod, but I was really aware or became really aware that I wasn't actually listening. I was responding in my mind. And that gets felt in every relationship. So part of it, to bring it back to what we said earlier, it's learning to be with my own discomfort. And when I can tend to that, oh, what am I noticing right now? Oh, I'm noticing I'm responding instead of truly listening. And then I take a deep breath and then recommit myself to actually hearing the person.
So good. And you feel it too. There's a difference, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, this was amazing. Thank you for chatting today. I'm now going to ask you what we call this the Fresh Five. This is how we wrap up our podcast. It's 5 quick questions to get to know you a little bit better. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. And I know we talked about how we ask questions, so I hope I'm going to ask you these in the right way. Okay. First one, you're on a plane, TJ. Where are you headed?
Oh, the first thing that came to mind is Hawaii.
I love Hawaii. Good one. Love it too. Okay. Your favorite dessert?
Oh, my favorite dessert. Wow. I would say strawberry shortcake is what came up.
Yum, 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 yum. Okay. Book or movie?
Book for sure is A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. That book changed my life. My favorite movie is an old movie from the early 90s called Baraka. My favorite movie.
Okay. Noting both of those. Thank you. Dog or cat?
I love cats, but dog for sure.
Okay. I respect it. Okay. What makes you smile? Last question, TJ. What makes you smile?
What makes me smile most is watching human kindness, one person caring for another, and that opportunity is all around us. And when I see that, that gives me the biggest smile.
I could hear you smiling through I can just hear that in your voice. That's a great point. Okay, TJ, thank you so much for chatting with me. If people want to follow you and learn more tips, where can we go? What's the best place?
tjwoodward.com, and on that page you'll see my socials and all the different ways you can stay connected with me.
Okay, amazing. I really enjoyed chatting with you today, and I know our audience took a lot from this as well. Thank you so much, TJ. Great to talk to you.
Thank you. You too.
Congrats, you made it to the end. If you want to continue to freshen up your day, you can watch us on Fresh Living every weekday on CBS Channel 2 in Utah at 1 o'clock. You can also watch us on our YouTube channel, KUTV Fresh Living, and follow us on social media. We will see you next week.